Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm really happy to see that there are so many of you that are connected this evening. And I would like to start by thanking Calibrate, BenQ, and Cyberphoto for hosting this webinar this evening. And let me just quick check to see how many of people are connected. I think the majority are connected now. So I think I will start the session. And just for your information, the webinar will be recorded, so you'll receive a replay link afterwards, so you can always have a look at it again. I will remove my webcam and let's see, sorry, there we go. So let's see. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Solli. I'm working as a full-time photographer since a few years. And originally I'm from Sweden, but I'm based in Paris since more than 12 years now. For those of you who are curious on my work, you can find most of my photos here on Instagram. I have two different accounts. So Solli_K that you have here. There you can find most of my pictures of landscapes. And then I have a second Instagram account that is dedicated for food. And this is my website. But this evening, we will be talking about winter landscapes. First, let's have a look on the agenda so you know what I will cover tonight. So first we will have a look on how to plan a winter photography trip. Then I will explain what gear you would need for this type of winter photography trip. I will also share some of my experiences and what to think of when you are out in the field. And we will also be looking at what gear you would need and what settings you should use when capturing the northern lights. And then we will finish with a short Lightroom session where I will be editing a winter photography. And then in the end, we will have a Q&A session where if you have any questions, feel free to add them in the small question box, and I will go through them in the end of the webinar. So let's begin. So planning is one of the most crucial parts when you want to do a winter photography trip. Actually, it's always good to plan a trip no matter what kind of photography you're doing, but especially a winter photography trip because you want to make sure that there is snow when you're going there. And so if your goal is to have snow in the destination you're traveling to, I would advise you to check the previous year's weather statistics so that you know what month you have a lot of snowfall. And of course, it's not 100% guarantee, but at least it will minimize the risk of arriving to your destination during a period when there is no snow. So usually you have the most snowfall in mid-December, January until March, at least in the 3 destinations that I'm going to cover this evening. So Lapland in Finland, Lofoten Islands in Norway, and Iceland. And another thing to take into account is that the days are usually shorter in December and January. So if you're going to do the sunset, sunrise, and sunsets, you'll most likely be out all day because usually the sunrise is already around 9 o'clock and then you have the sunset around noon or 1 o'clock. And If you're going to Iceland, I would recommend to travel there in December, March. So let's see. Sorry, let's see. Okay, December, March. And if you're traveling to Lofoten, I would also recommend you to travel there between end of January to March, because in December and until end of January, the sun doesn't rises above the horizon. So if your purpose is to capture the sunset and sunrise, then you wouldn't see these until end of January. So make sure to travel after that period. And in Lapland, I would also recommend to travel in the end of January. And the snowfall begins already in October in Lapland, but there's not a lot of snowfall. And if you want to see landscapes like this one here that you can see here to the right, where you have snow-covered spruces, then it's better to travel there after mid-January. It's actually a short video that I took a few years ago in Lapland, just so you can see how it looks like. So you can see there is a lot of snow, and the spruces are all almost bending because of the heavy snow. So it looks very beautiful. And there are a few applications that I use to plan my trip. So the first one that I find very useful is the one called suncalc.net. So with this app, I can see the time of the sunrise and the sunset, and also the position of the sun. And this is very useful if you're going to plan the sunrise or sunset shootings at a specific location, because using this app you can see if a specific location is better for sunrise or sunset. And I also use the Weather Radar. It's another application. It's a weather forecast application, and I find it very reliable, and I have a very good experience with its forecast. And then I also use Windy, so you can see the direction of the clouds, for example. And that can be very useful when you're on the location and you're planning to go to a specific place. And if there are no clouds, for example, and you want to photograph when there are clouds, then you can have a look on Windy and see the direction of the clouds and see if you should stay or move on to another location. So the duration is also good to have into account. So for example, I would highly advise to stay minimum 1 week on your destination, especially if you're traveling to places like Lofoten or Iceland, because some days there might be storms and very windy, so you will not even be able to go out and shoot. So make sure to take those situations into account when you plan your trip. When I have been in Lapland, in Finland, to capture the snow-covered spruces, 4 to 5 days have been enough, as there are really not many locations to travel to, and most of the time you spend in the national parks. And but on Iceland, you would often move from one day to another because the locations are very spread out on the island, and there are not many accommodations, so you have to more or less travel from one day to another. And in Lofoten, you have many locations, and there are many good spots, but I would recommend you to be there at least 1 week. And there you don't need to move around because the spots are not so far away from each other. So if you're planning a trip to Iceland or Lofoten, I would recommend you to stay at least 1 week or even more. And to Lapland is enough with a few days. And once you have scouted and found the spots you want to photograph, it's good to find an accommodation that is situated in between these, so you won't have to drive too far just to reach one spot. I remember when one time I fell in love with a beautiful cabin, and I booked it for a week without thinking of if it really was close to the other spots that I was going to photograph. And unfortunately, the cabin was really in the southern part of Lofoten, so I had to drive at least 1 hour every time to reach a spot. And that's quite a lot if you have to wake up at 4 in the morning and if there is a snowstorm. So make sure to plan your spots in advance and find an accommodation that is situated strategically in the center of these. And another important thing is to book well in advance. If you're traveling to Iceland and Lofoten, there are usually no hotels. So often you would be renting a cabin. And there might also be workshop groups out there during the same period. So usually I book my accommodation at least 6 months, if not more, ahead. And I also make sure to cancel it if something unexpected happens. But sometimes, of course, you can be lucky. I think it was this year I went to Lofoten and I found a really nice accommodation just 2 months before because somebody had canceled it. So you can be lucky and find something nice in the last minute as well. And let's have a look on the gear. So if you're traveling to, so the first thing you should bring is, of course, your camera and a sturdy tripod, and make sure that your tripod is equipped with spikes. Usually you have spikes if you remove these rubber feet. And it's also good to have a tripod that has these legs made out of carbon, because carbon is much lighter to carry than aluminium, for example. And you might be walking a lot, so it's good to have something that is light to carry. And it's also good to bring a remote shutter control and filters. If you do long exposure, you can bring GND and ND filters. And make sure to bring lots of batteries to your camera, because of the cold temperature, usually they drain quite fast. So make sure to bring a lot of them and charge them every day when you're there. And also bring a power bank so you can charge your mobile. So if you're heading to these cold temperatures, it's very important to to dress accordingly. I know when I was in Lapland, for example, in Finland, one day it was minus 31 degrees. This is a picture from when I was in Finland, and in Lofoten around minus 17 degrees. And with the strong winds, it also feels much colder than it is. So I would recommend to wear at least 3 layers of clothes, because if you're walking a lot, you get hot too. So it's good to have many layers so you can remove a layer if you get too hot. And the base layer is should be a thermal underwear, so it's what you wear closest to your skin. And the recommended fabrics are wool or something synthetic. It should be something that lets your body breathe. So it could be a top and leggings, and the mid layer could be a sweater or a jacket, also a breathable material. And then the outer layer should be a jacket that protects you from the cold wind, but also is waterproof, because it could rain and you could be under snowfall. So it's good to have something that is also waterproof. And I also make sure to bring lots of warm socks, because I often get blisters when I walk a lot. So I buy these hiking socks. So they are in warm material like wool mixed with another fabric. And that's important to keep the feet warm, but also that they can transpire. And in terms of shoes, I usually bring hiking boots that are waterproof. And so in this picture, I'm wearing loads of layers of clothes. So this is my winter jacket, and I have another jacket under it, and I think 2 layers. And then I'm wearing a thermal overall because it was minus 31 degrees, and we were spending like 6 hours outside. So it was important to dress accordingly. And as I often spend at least 2 hours in the field when taking a picture, it's important to wear good gloves for this situation. So I often use liners and a shell. So you can see a picture of the ones that I'm using. I have these and these shells, and I also bring lots of warmers. And when I'm walking, I wear the liners and the shell. And then when I'm taking a picture, I remove these shell and just use the liners because it's not so easy to manipulate or work with the camera with the shells. And I bring lots of warmers with me. And these liners that you can see here in the pictures, they are equipped with a small pocket on each of them. So even on these, where I can insert a warmer inside. So usually I put a warmer in the shells, even in the liners. And there are also warmers for the shoes. So I put one in each. And I also put one in my jacket to keep my mobile warm. And so in my shoes as well. And these warmers, I think yeah, these last 8 hours, and I think these last between 12 or even longer. So one package is enough for one day. So it's good to calculate how many days you're going to be there and if you're going to shoot the sunrise and sunset, so you can make sure to order enough warmers. And if you will be doing seascapes, you might have to enter in the cold water, and there might also be rocks that you need to climb on. And some rocks can be extremely slippery due to wet algae that are covering them, but there can also be ice-covered rocks. So I always bring these crampons that I attach to my shoes. And as soon as I step out of the car, I put them on. And because you never know what kind of surface that you will face while going to your spot. So as I've mentioned earlier, you should also make sure that your tripod is equipped with spikes. And I think this is a short video so you can see how useful the crampons are when you have to climb up ice-covered rocks near the... So I think I took this in Lofoten. So you can see how useful it is, and it is easier to climb the rocks without them, because otherwise I would probably have slipped. And snowshoes can also be good. I have not used them when I've been on Iceland neither, or in Lofoten. But in Finland, they're very useful, and they're very good if you're going to be hiking in the snow. So for example, when I was taking pictures in the national parks, I was using snowshoes, but I didn't buy any because they're often available for rent. So it's nothing you need to bring with you, but it's good to make sure to rent them when you have reached your destination. And it's much easier to walk with them than just ordinary shoes. And I would also suggest you to bring rain boots if you're going in the water. So It gets pretty cold with rain boots because they're not very warm, but usually I bring the rain boots in the car and then I change if I know that I'm going to step into the water. And if you saw the first picture in the beginning of the presentation, I was actually standing in the water for 1 hour. And I can tell you that it was not a very pleasant experience. It was really cold. But the sunrise of a few seconds made up for it. But in order to get to the spot, I had to walk in water and also very slippery algae covered stones. So it's very good to bring rain boots if you know that you will be doing that kind of seascape pictures. And so this is the picture I took. And this is a short video just to show you that it's very useful to bring rain boots as well on your trip. Because sometimes a composition needs you to go into the water. So, and if you're going to the water, it's also good to check the tides before, and that's something you can check online. And I also it's good to bring snacks, because if you're going to stay out for 6 hours, it's good to fill up the energy. And I usually bring nuts and dried fruits and chocolates. And it's also good to have in case you have an accident, and if you're waiting for somebody to pick up your car. So always make sure to fill your pockets with snacks just in case. And so when you are in the field, it's you will notice, at least in Lofot, in all the both in Lofoten, Iceland, and Finland, that there are orange sticks. Let's check this video so you can see. You see these orange sticks along the way. So those are placed to warn you not to drive too close to the edges of the road, so you won't, otherwise you would end up in the ditch. So make sure to keep some distance between your car and these orange sticks. I have seen many cars being stuck in the snow or in the ditch. And if you get stuck, a trick is to use the rubber mat in the car, at least if you have the wheel that is still touching the ground. Otherwise, it's better to call the recovery service emergency number that your car rental provides you with. And if you have a look on this website, safetravel.is, it's a website from Icelandic website where you can find a very useful video that I watched before traveling to Iceland, where they share a lot of tips if you will be driving there. And the first time I traveled to Iceland and had photographed the northern lights in minus temperatures for at least 1 hour, I was so excited to look at the photos when I entered the cabin. So the first thing I did was to pick up my backpack and I grabbed my camera. However, I didn't think of the temperature shock that the camera got. So from being out in the freezing outdoor temperature and the warm temperature inside the cabin, and condense was created immediately in the lens. So I couldn't see anything, and in the long run, condensation can ruin your camera and lenses. And a way to avoid it is to always let your camera and lenses to adapt to temperature changes gradually. And I always put silica gel in my backpack in order to dry moisture. And so if I arrive to the cabin in the evening after sunset shooting, for example, I always, I don't take out my camera. But if I am going to a sunrise in the morning, I prepare the backpack, and then I leave it in a place that is not very warm. So for example, in the hallway. So when I'm going out to shoot in the morning, there won't be any temperature shock. And it's also important not to open your backpack when you are back in your warm cabin. So leave your equipment inside your backpack and let them adjust to the indoor temperature slowly. So you can take it out after just a few hours. I don't know how many of you have seen the Northern Lights, but it's definitely an extraordinary experience. The first time I saw it was on Iceland, but I've also seen it from the airline and in Lofoten. You never know how long it will last or how long you can see it, so it's always good to be prepared. And there are a few websites that you can have a look at in order to see the activity of the Northern Lights. So I have mentioned a few here. So you have the Icelandic Meteorological Office, Vedur. The link is here. And then you have one for Finland that is useful if you're going to Lapland, and one Norwegian if you're going to Lofoten Islands. And in parallel with the Northern Lights forecasts, you should also check the weather forecast to see if there will be any clouds or not, because a cloud-free sky is the optimal in order to see the Northern Lights. And you can see in this picture, there were quite many clouds, but I could see them. But if you have a cloud-free sky, of course, you can see all the Northern Lights. And you can of course, only see them when you have a dark sky and when there is a high activity of the aurora. And so when you are in these locations, make sure to have a look on the forecast of the aurora and the weather forecast, and don't go to bed if you see if the activity is high. So just go out and see if you can see the Northern Lights. And I would recommend you to also scout for a spot to take pictures at, because so you know where you will be heading to if you see that the activity is high in the evenings, just to make sure that you have a nice foreground when you're taking the pictures of the Northern Lights. So when you can see the Northern Lights between September to March. And some gears that are useful to bring in order to capture the Northern Lights are, of course, your camera, but also a sturdy tripod, because we need to stabilize our camera. And it's also good to have a remote shutter cable and a wide angle lens and a headlamp, because it will be dark when you're out there and you need to see what you're doing and you need both of your hands free. So make sure to have a headlamp so you can see when you're attaching your camera and taking the pictures, but make sure to turn it off once you're set. You can also use a filter to avoid light pollution. You would most probably be out of reach of light pollution when you are in these locations, but if you happen to be capturing the Northern Lights in, for example, Reine, a small village in Lofoten, there might be some cottages with outdoor lamps, so it's good to have this filter in order to avoid the light pollution. And make sure to bring at least 2 spare batteries, because the cold weather can drain your batteries. And so once you are set and have decided where to stand to capture the Northern Lights, you set up your camera and you attach your remote cable. Now the challenge will be to get the focus point right, because you don't want to go back home with blurry or out of focus pictures. You want to make sure that your foreground is in focus. And as it's dark and we can't really see in darkness and set the focus point, we have to set it on infinity. And you also have to make sure to shoot in manual mode. And I would recommend to bring a wide-angle lens between 14 to 24 millimeters. And the aperture that you should use should be around 2.8 or max f4. And the exposure time can vary. So I would say that it's best to experiment depending on the situation. So for example, you can start with a few seconds if the aurora is moving quite fast. But if they move slowly, you can use an exposure of minimum 10 seconds, but you can sometimes go up to 20 seconds. So it totally depends on the movement of the light and the situation. So make sure to experiment to find what you think looks best. And you can also increase the ISO. You can start with 500 and then you can increase up to a few thousands. For example, I have written the settings that I used to take this picture. So the ISO was 2500, because the best is to use a low ISO in order to avoid grain. But with the cameras of today, you can use an ISO of a few thousand and you would still not see the grain. So 2500 is perfectly fine. And I was using a 15 millimeter lens, and the aperture was set to 2.8 and the exposure time was 10 seconds. But of course, you should experiment, but make sure to keep yourself within these settings. Then when you're back home, I guess you're excited to retouch all your pictures, and a monitor for photographers is very good to have. I use the screen of, before I was using the screen of my iMac and MacBook Pro for quite a long when I was post-processing my pictures, until I discovered that there were monitors for photographers. So today I'm using this one from BenQ. It's a 32-inch panel, and you have monitors for photographers in different sizes from BenQ, and they all are equipped with 4K resolution, and they provide excellent work experience, but also exceptional accuracy of details and textures. And it's also important to calibrate your screen. So when you work with your images, you want to be sure that you're seeing the real colors that your camera sensor was able to capture. But unfortunately, our displays, our monitors, for example, and graphic cards are made by different technologies. So the colors that are displayed can be affected by that. So that's why it's important to calibrate, and you can use a probe. I'm using this one from Calibrate to calibrate your monitor to be sure to see the correct colors. And it's recommended to do it every second week. So once a month is perfectly enough. And now I thought that we could have a look on how I have edited this winter photo. So this is the before picture, and this is the after. And I'm just going to let's see, sorry. Sorry, so let's move on to Lightroom. I'm just going to open the software. Just hang on a moment. Let's see. So here we go. I hope you all can see it. I'm just going to check the chat box to make sure that, okay, perfect. So this is the before picture. So what I do in the beginning, so before editing a picture, I look at it and see what I don't like. So for example, here, the picture is too dark and I need to adjust the color temperature and also increase the lights. And yeah, there are a few things to do. And I start by going down here in the right bar to lens corrections. And so often the checkbox for remove chromatic aberrations is already checked, but make sure that is checked. So if it's not checked, check it, and also make sure to enable profile correction. And here you should be able to look for your profile, and I was using a Nikon lens, and you can see it automatically found it. So when I have done this, I scroll up and I start by adjusting the color temperature. So let's see, I think this picture is quite cold. So I will, oh, it's too warm. I will increase the color temperature and make it a bit colder. So I think maybe to 5,000, something like this, but it's something I can, of course, change later. And then I will increase the tints a little bit. So maybe something like this, +8, +10. And then I move down to the exposure. I think it's too dark, so I open up, so I increase the exposure a little bit. So maybe I think 1, or yeah, I think 1.4. This is pretty good. And I also increase the contrast a little bit, something like this, +20. And I also increase the whites a little bit because we want to make sure that the snow is white. And I also make sure to increase the saturation because I think it's beautiful to see. This picture was taken during a sunrise, and you can see we have beautiful pastel colors. So I want to enhance those. So I increase the saturation slightly, so maybe around +10. And then I go down and I also increase or decrease the darks because I want to enhance these colors that we can see in the background. So I think maybe -19 is good. And I don't know if you have downloaded the latest Lightroom, but there are many new masks that you can use. So what I'm going to do in this picture, because you can see that the snow is not really white, it's a bit blue because it's reflecting the blue sky. And with the new functions, you can actually, let's see, we can use a mask on the subjects, which are these spruces. But I also want to cover the snow that we can see here in the foreground. So what you do is you click on add here, and then you choose a brush. So here I'm just going to brush the snow that we can see in the foreground because I want to make sure to edit everything together. And I adjust the size of the brush here. Let's see. So something like this is fine. Okay, so now everything is covered, and then I press on O so I can see the changes that I'm doing. So here I think that the color temperature is too cold. I want it to be a bit warmer. So I can adjust that here. So let's see, not too much, but maybe I'm going to zoom in so you can see. So it was, let's see, it was here before. So you can see it was pretty cold, but I'm going to make it a little bit warmer. So maybe think this is pretty good, 25. So now the snow is white. And I think I'll also do some adjustments in the sky. So I will create a new mask for the sky. So I click on select sky here. So now you can see that the sky is automatically selected. But I think we need to make some modifications and remove these parts because it's also covering a part of the sprue. So I click on subtract and then I use the brush and I zoom in here and I'll just remove these parts so they're not covered with the changes that I will make to the sky. I think I'm going to reduce the size of the brush here, and because you can see where it's red, and I'm just removing those parts. So this can take some time, but I'm just going to do it quickly just to show what I'm doing. So just make sure to remove everything that has some red color. Let's see, I think this part. Now I can also see that the entire sky has not been selected because here I need to add. So I use this button, I click on this button, add brush, because I need to add some parts of the sky that we can see here. So I reduce the size of the brush and then I cover this small area that we have here. I'll just make it slightly bigger. So now I'm just doing this quickly, but of course it can take some more time. So now I have covered the sky here, and yeah, I also need to do that here, and I can see that these trees are also covered. So here I will use the first brush that I was having here and make it a bit bigger. Oh no, that was the, I will remove that. So these parts I'm removing. Yeah, so this can take some time, but I'm just going to show you. I'll not do everything. So now I'm just going to show you what I will do with the sky. So when you have the sky covered, then I will, I click on O so I can see the adjustments that I'm going to make. And I think I'll only change the temperature in the sky, and I'll just make it slightly, depends if you want, you can make it either colder or a bit warmer. I think I prefer to make it a little bit warmer, something like this. And then I click on enter, and then I'll make some last modifications. Maybe I will change the, change the temperature on the overall picture. Then I think I'm pretty much happy with the results. And if you click on Y, you can see the before and after. So you can see we went from this to this. And of course, it will take some more time to make sure to select the entire sky and the spruces, but it's just a quick way to show how you can simply edit your winter photo. So let's go back and I'll turn on my webcam so you can see me. And let's see we have if you have any questions. I'm going to see. I'm just going to check the box. So let's see. So the first question is so the first question is, what's the speed of Northern Lights? When I see a video, I don't know if it's the real speed or a time lapse. The speed of the Northern Lights can vary. They can be fast and they can be slow. So I don't know. I know it depends on the video that you have seen, because I know that some videos are made have been made by time lapses. So the Northern Lights that you see is moving very quickly. But sometimes, so it depends on the video that you have seen, but they can be they can be slow or fast. It's different from time to time. And the next question is, with Aurora shots, what aperture settings do I need to get a large depth of field and get the foreground sharp? Well, I've been using 2.0. It depends on your lens, but even if you have, with the lenses that I've been using, even with 2.8, you can have the foreground very sharp. So, and it also, of course, depends on the location where you are. But the most important is to set the focus point on infinity. And you can even prepare your camera during the daytime and set it on infinity, or when you are in the field, and you can take some test shots to make sure that everything in the foreground is sharp. But when it's set on infinity, everything should be sharp. And of course, it's important to use a very good lens as well when capturing the Northern Lights. Then we have another question. How would focus stacked image turn out with Aurora images? I've actually never tried to do focus stacked images with Aurora lights. I think you could make them if the light is moving very slowly. But if it's moving very fast, I don't think you would have a very good result. And then we have another question. How do you adjust your snow scenes so that the snow is white and not gray? That's a very good question. Actually, I've never had any picture where the snow have been gray. So I think if you have that, I think you have to adjust the color temperature. And also make sure to always shoot in RAW, so you have more possibilities to affect the colors in the editing. And then we have another question. Which are your favorite places in Lofoten? There are many spots in Lofoten that I love to shoot. For example, this beach here that is, I think it's called Unstad beach. It's a very famous beach for surfers. And I also like to go down to Reine in the south. But I can share a top 10 location tips if you want. I can share it on my social media so you can see my favorite spots in Lofoten, because I don't remember all of them by name. And the next question, do you always capture landscapes with a wide angle. It depends. If I do seascape, I always bring a wide angle lens. I think I have a 19mm and also a 21mm lens. And those are my favorite lenses when I'm doing landscape. And then we have another question. Do you use presets? And if so, are they produced by yourself? And no, I don't use any presets because I think each picture is different from another, and also the location. So I don't use any presets, and I edit each picture depending on the light situation and how I feel that I want to how I want this picture to represent the idea I had when I've been on the field. Another question, do you use auto white balance for snow, or do you have a range of Kelvin settings you use? Actually, today, with the cameras, with today's technology, I'm using the automatic white balance in the camera, and I have never had any issues later when I have been editing the pictures. So I think you can use the auto white balance when you're out shooting, because with today's technology, the cameras are very good when it comes to white balance. And let's see if we have more questions. How do you? So in the meanwhile, you can still add more questions if you have more questions to ask. And I also wanted to let you know that there is that Cyberphoto have an offer on BenQ and Calibrite. So you can see the discount code in the chat box. And they will be offering 7% off selected BenQ monitors with the code BenQ7, and 10% off on Calibrite with the code Calibrite10 on their website. And you can use these codes until November 4th. And there's also the link to Cyberphoto in the message. So I have another question. Do you ever use polarizing filters, and what is your experience with them? And yes, I do use polarizing lenses, filters, but not when I'm photographing snow, because I have had the experience that the snow have turned blue. So I make sure to avoid the polarizer. But if I'm doing a seascape, then I always bring polarizer filter. And for example, when I took this picture that you can see here in the presentation, I was using a polarizing filter. So it's something I always do when I capture seascapes. So let's see, I don't think we have any more question. I'm just going to make sure that I haven't missed anything. No, I think that's it. But if you have other questions, feel free to contact me on Instagram or by email, and I would be happy to get back to you. So thanks a lot for watching this webinar, and thanks to Cyberphoto, Calibrite, and BenQ. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.